As you'll see, the title of this first video is how do you double your earnings and half your stress. So that kind of sounds like one of those claims which is seductive, but can it really be true? And I really hope that as you go through this video, you'll find that there are people every day who are going out finding ways to double their earnings. There are people every day who are going out finding ways to transform the level of stress. And there's a pretty good chance in your life you've had times where one or either of those two things have happened. The key thing is, can we actually make it happen by design, deliberately, as opposed to accidentally? So I'm going to start with this concept of wealth. And I want to start with a concept which is called the wealth paradox. This is really the basis of the entire wealth dynamic system. The wealth paradox is about, as we start generating more money, and there's a very good chance that whatever you're doing in your life right now, you're earning more than you were in the past. Or you've had times in your past where it's gone up and down in earnings, and the real question is, why is it that as we start earning more money, it actually sometimes disappears so quickly? And the reason is because of this wealth paradox. And here's how the wealth paradox goes. It goes, the more money you have, the more opportunities you have to lose it. The more money you have, the more opportunities you have to lose it. You'll see people who win the lottery and suddenly they are losing money like they never lost it before. And so for some people, no matter how much money you give them, it just disappears again. So wealth can't really be about how much money you have. But also, the opposite is true. You can go to people like Richard Branson, Donald Trump, people that are well known as wealth creators, and there have been times in their lives where they lost all the money. But even though they lost it all, it came back again. So money seems to have this way of finding a level. And that's where I define wealth. It's not about the money you have. In fact, the definition of wealth I'm going to use is wealth is not how much money you have. Wealth is what you're left with if you lose all your money. Wealth is what you're left with. Some of us are so busy chasing the money, we forget the fact that money is actually attracted quite easily to wealthy people, such that if they lose it, it comes back again. And if we focus at the wealth instead of at the money, there's a very good chance that money would also be flowing the way it should for us as well. So this comes down to the fact that wealth is not about the money in the same way that a river is not about the water. You can take the water away and the river would still be there. And then when the rain comes, all of that water would also find its way back to that river again. So this is what we mean by wealth. It's something that's permanent that you're actually creating. And this river, by the way, has an equation to it. And this is the wealth equation. This is the basis of wealth dynamics, which has got 4 sides to a square, which has got 2 opposites to each part of this equation. And you're going to see that there is a particular way that you work, which is going to be designed so that it is making the most of what you're already strongest at within this equation. So what's the wealth equation? The wealth equation is that wealth equals 2 things, something called value multiplied by something called leverage. Value. Think about a river that's flowing. Water will always flow from high ground to low ground, so there has to be a height differential. Well, in the same way that water will always flow from high ground to low ground, money will always flow from high value to low value. It's always an exchange. So let's really get into what we mean by doubling our money. Let's imagine I was to sell my shoes. So I decided to sell my shoes, and I say I will sell my shoes for $50. Well, what that really means is that I need to find someone who values my shoes more than the $50. I'm looking for someone who values my shoe higher than I do. And so I might find someone who says, I'll pay you $50 for the shoes. What's just happened is I have just found someone who values my shoes higher than I do, and as a result, it's their money that flows from them to me, and of course, it's my shoes that are passed from me to them. And if I wanted to double the money that's flowing, I have 2 choices. Number one is I can double the value. So how do I double value? Well, I might increase the value of the shoes in a whole series of different ways. I might get someone to sign it. I might make it a better material. But if I can double the value, I could sell those same pair of shoes or an improved pair of shoes for $100 instead of $50. And that would be about saying that value controls money flow in terms of speed. If I had it at double the height, it would have double the speed. But there's a second thing I can do, which is I can say I don't actually need to change the speed of money flow if I can change the width of money flow. So this is volume. This is what we mean by leverage. That leverage is widening the river. So how does leverage look with my shoes? I could say, well, if I can get $50 for 1 pair, maybe if I had 2 pairs of shoes, I'm multiplying out my shoes now, I'll get $50 and $50, I'll still make $100. I'll still double. So this idea of doubling up, you'll see entrepreneurs all the time looking at their plumbing system and saying, how can I double the value that I'm delivering? How can I multiply that value? How can I leverage it? And the key to this is realizing that there are 2 opposites to value and there's two opposites to leverage. And this is where your stress comes in, because for most of us, we're doing it the wrong way. Try this for a moment. Just take your arms and fold them, just like this. You may be folding your arms the same as me, but you may also be folding it opposite. Now, I have my right arm over my left arm. In a moment, count of 3, see if you can do the opposite. 1, 2, 3. And see if you have now shifted maybe like this, which means that your right arm is still over your left arm because you went back the same way. Or maybe the opposite, where you've actually now got your right arm over your left arm. And ask yourself, because you can't do both at the same time, this second way of doing it, does it feel more natural or not? See, here's the key. For a lot of us, we're going through life learning how to do things that feel like hard work. We go to school, and there's some things we do naturally, but rarely do our parents and our teachers say, just focus on the things you're good at and forget about the rest. They'll look at the things you're not so good at, and they'll say, you really need to really look at your weaknesses. Look at the things you're not so good at. So we go through life having to work harder at the things we're not so good at. And so it's no surprise that as we get older, we start finding that the things that we really are passionate about, we haven't spent so much time on. More importantly, those are the things that people are going to be most attracted to us on. So there are two opposites, just like these two opposites here, on how you create value. And I'm going to share what those two opposites are, because one of them is yours. I'm going to start with a square here, where this square is going to show, these two opposites, and you'll see that in this square, there is a top and bottom. So we're not talking about left and right here, we're talking about top and bottom. There are some people who have a thinking dynamic, which is how we're going to look at the top and bottom here, where they have their heads in the clouds. Thinking dynamic is where they're always creating new things. These are people who have something called intuitive thinking. So intuitive thinkers are people who are constantly innovating, they're constantly being creative. And they create value through something called innovation. This is the basis of wealth dynamics, is that value is something which comes in two parts, which is the top and bottom of the square. And some of us have a profile which is at the top end, some have the bottom end. An example of someone at the top end might be somebody like this person here. You might have taken the wealth dynamics test, or you may take the wealth dynamics test and find out that you are a creator. Bill Gates is a creator, Walt Disney, Edison, Einstein, people like Steve Jobs, Richard Branson. These are creators who are always starting new things. They don't actually have to finish things because they have other people to finish them for them. But you may be a creator or find your creator, and you're not even spending that much time on creativity now that you're running your business because you created it and now you're having to run it. But there are other people that can run it better than you. Just like Richard Branson has over 200 companies because he has other people who are running those companies for him. But you might be the opposite. You might have read books saying be creative. But the opposite down here, someone called a trader, someone like a George Soros, someone who's trading the stock markets. These are people who never created anything. And the truth is, they don't need to create anything because they have the opposite. And the opposite is down here. It's not intuitive thinking, which is having your head in the clouds. It's sensory thinking, which is having your ear to the ground. Having your ear to the ground is very different. You're sensing everything around you. And when you're a trader at sensory thinking, you don't create value through innovation, which is creating something smarter or quicker or faster or bigger. You actually create it through something called timing. Timing is knowing when to buy, when to sell. It's knowing when to serve. You can find a lot of people who are trader profiles. They've never traded the stock market. They've never bought or sold a property. They may be in the emergency room of a hospital because they're activity-based. They're constantly sensing what's needed next. And they'll finish the day having succeeded if they have kept all those balls in motion in a way that a creator succeeds in the opposite way, where they're actually really focusing on that one big thing, which is going to be their next creation. So by realizing that these are opposite of each other, that the more sensory someone is, the less they're able to be creative, you'll find that traders who are really successful don't even try and create. They'll just sense what's happening in the marketplace. Let's take another example, someone here, someone like an accumulator. Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, he's an accumulator profile where he is, yes, very good at timing, but he has timing at a different scale. He's much more analytical about what he does. In very much the same way that someone here, creative, but the opposite of an accumulator, someone called a star, can be very creative, but they're creative not with the product, they're actually creating with their brand. And they're much more extrovert in the way that they do it. Someone like an Oprah Winfrey is the opposite of someone like Warren Buffett. And so when we start realizing that each of these people have a different a game that they play, a different way they support each other as well, then we start realizing that as we start going out to the edges like this, we come across not just the dynamic of the opposites of value, but also the opposites of leverage. So the opposite of leverage are the action dynamics. This is the thought line, which is thinking dynamic. This is a thinking dynamic here, which is top and bottom. And then we then have the action dynamic, which is left and right. You could almost, in very simplistic terms, talk about a brain where you have got the frontal lobe, which is the creative side, the temporal lobe, which is the side which is all about the senses. You've got the left brain, which is analytical, the right brain, which is all about relationships. And you're going to find on this side, the thinking dynamic is something called extrovert thinking dynamic, as opposed to the introvert thinking dynamic on this side. And there are wealth creators who also focus at their strength as a result of one of these two. Introvert, what is the leverage of an introvert? The leverage of an introvert is something called multiply. Multiply, because they're very analytical, it's about systems, they're able to ask the question, how can this happen without me? So how can this business happen without me? I'll put a system in place. You know the number of stars that I have met who have tried to put systems in place, and frankly, they're better off getting someone else to help them do that, because while to get systems in place might sound obvious, it requires you to make things simple and make many. That's what multiply means, like a franchise or a systematic way to do things, a process. Whereas on this side, these people don't know how to make things simple. In fact, often they just keep making things complicated. That's on this side here, which is the opposite of multiply, which is fine, because this is not about saying, how can I make things simple and have many? It's about, how can I make things complex, but make sure there's only one? This is something called magnify. So for example, Oprah has one brand that no one can copy, and she just keeps magnifying it. You'll find that the person here, a supporter profile, is somebody, for example, like Jack Welch, who is a leader, one of the managers of the century with General Electric. Supporter is all about leadership. It's all about the people. So this is very extrovert. It's working through people. As opposed to the opposite on this side, the Lord profile, someone like Sergey Brin at Google, for example, or someone like Rockefeller, who doesn't really have to worry about all the people because other people can. They'll be looking at the systems they're putting in place. They'll be looking at the analysis of those systems. I call it Lord because it's like a landlord. It's someone who doesn't need to own the asset, but they are good enough with the numbers that they can then actually create cash flow off that same asset. Or down here, this is now someone extrovert, but sensory, a deal maker, like Donald Trump, who's always looking for the next deal. You know, his book is called The Art of the Deal. And the idea is that here, you're able to get the right timing with people, which is the opposite of someone up here called a mechanic, the final one about eighth, who's very good at finishing things, as good at finishing things as the creator is at starting things, because there's a cycle here. And the mechanic is someone like, let's say, for example, Ray Kroc, who is the one who multiplied out McDonald's, someone who's very good at creating a system as opposed to a product or as opposed to a brand. Every single one of these people, you'll notice, are continuing to do what they do based on the fact that they love what they do. They don't have so much stress. They can take a lot on because it's already their natural way of doing things. In the way that stress, when I fold my arms, I'm not even thinking about it, it just happens. If I had to keep on thinking the opposite way, that would create stress. And so for many of us, we're doing things which are the wrong things as a result of simply not following our path and knowing what we should say no to. Success in life is not what you say yes to, it's what you say no to. And it's about realizing that when you start following your path, you become a value to others. You find that every creator has got others in their team that actually work with them, that every one of them partners with different people. And in the coming videos, I'll share with you exactly how you create $1 million team and how you build this for success for yourself as well. But I want to let you into a secret here. This is not all about how you go about building your team or how you go about building a big company. This is about how you transform and shift your own life. So this is about how you can use this concept here of the wealth dynamic square to already understand your own personal flow and shift your flow today by following some very simple steps. I'm going to give those steps right now as the basis for you to take some action before the next video. So this is all part of wealth dynamics, and you're going to see that these 4 parts of the square have an energy to them. I'm going to liken these 4 parts of the square to seasons, because this also links to the cycle of time that you're going to find in every business, and you're going to find within every team, even every relationship. And what I'm going to share is that at the top base here, if we were to call this, let's call it spring energy, which is the first of the seasons, this spring energy is something which is all about starting things, making them grow. And from the spring, we end up moving to summer energy, which is making things glow. That's what this group here do. And then you're going to find that here, we're onto the autumn energy, which is a different type of energy. It's a settling energy. And this is all about making things slow. A lot of people down here will frustrate people up here unless you're respecting them for what they bring, which is successful. It's why so many relationships have problems, because you married someone who's different from you, and now trying to judge that person or assess that person based on your criteria or your natural path, when frankly their natural path is very different and their needs are very different as well. And from autumn, we then move to this one here, which is the winter, which is exactly what the energy of these people feel like when they show up in the room. That's where their strength is, but too often, if you're not using them for that strength becomes a weakness. So the key thing here, spring, summer, autumn, winter, is that these create energies. And those energies are the fundamentals for you to be able to know that as you are creating your flow and where you're going in life, there's no point going to a kitchen and trying to cook in the fridge. It's the wrong energy or the wrong environment to make that happen. The key thing here is how you set up the right environments for you to already be doubly effective every day, to halve your stress, to be able to achieve so much more in so less time. So how do we do that? We see that all of this is more than just a square. This is the base of a pyramid. And the pyramid looks like this, where the square in 3 dimensions has got an apex where they all link together to a 5th element. So these elements, by the way, they link to a cycle here. This goes back 5,000 years to something called the I Ching, which is from China, where they have 5 Chinese elements. And these Chinese elements found their way all the way through everything to the days of the week we have today, with the sun and the moon and the 5 planets. And it also links to everything you'll find that Plato talks about, or Hippocrates talks about, or even Newton looked at in terms of different energies that we have within our cycle. And Carl Jung, who's really the grandfather of psychometric testing, he used these same elements to come up with words like introvert and extrovert, or intuitive and sensory. What we're going to see is that these ones have a cycle where if you follow them in the right order, you can be in flow every day. But if you get them in the wrong order, you're going to find life gets tough. So first of all, we've gone through the fact that there are 4 seasons, and there's one 5th element, which I'll come to in a moment, which links them all together. I can link them now as a cycle on this little graph of this 5-pointed star here, where that first energy, the spring energy, this one, which is the top of the wealth dynamic square, has also got a Chinese element, which is called wood. Wood is all about growing. This is about to grow. And these people have a question which allows things to grow. They have the question, what? So if you happen to be dynamo energy, which is what we call this one, dynamo is someone who's always asking the question, what? What's the new idea? What's the new business? It's why they're always creating new things. So if that's you, you might find that every day you love doing that. But sometimes you're not able to because you have to do other things in your job or other things in your business. Or you might be the second person. This second person is the one who loves getting on the phone, speaking to people. This is now not the spring, but the summer energy. And summer energy, which we call blaze, this energy here, we all need a little bit of it. And it's not like we only have one of these. We all need to speak to other people. But sometimes we're not just in the mood to do it, or we get disturbed at the wrong time to make this happen. But this blaze energy, wood, this is fire. And as you can see here, the Chinese have a cycle here where you need wood to turn into fire. So someone who's just blaze energy and doesn't have the question what, they'll be going out meeting people every day without even knowing why they're meeting them. But if they're here and they're so good at something called glow, which is the promise they make, they have a question, which is the question, who? Whenever they've got a challenge, they'll go, who do I speak to? Who do I go to? Which is great for someone like that in your team, but only from the point of view that you've got what you're going to do in order to create the who. Then from the who, you have this person here who's the autumn energy. And autumn, we call that tempo. Tempo is the third of these elements. And tempo, which is all about timing, they're always asking the question, when? And this is a very important question at a point when the team is settling, when are things going to happen? This is when everything turns into a plan. And this when here is about slow, so that you've got time to get that right. And that is not the fire energy, but the earth energy, because fire will always settle into earth. And then from that earth energy, you then lead on to this one here, which is the winter energy. And winter, we call this one steel, because it's very structured. By the way, if you like, you could, as a very simple way to remember this, think of a pack of cards, which have the same origins as this as well. We find that within a pack of cards, this dynamo here actually looks like a tree. It's a club which is like head in the clouds. It kind of looks like this. This is all about wood. And the opposite, which is down here, the earth, which is the other black one, which is spades, obviously earth, spades. This one here gives you a way to remember the one down here, which is about spade in the earth. You have the summer, which obviously, because it's about people, is the hearts. And you have the steel, the winter, which obviously is the diamond, because this is structure. And everything shifts into diamonds when you put enough pressure into it. This one here, steel, this one, winter energy, that is now not earth, but metal energy. This is to know. Many of us need to know first. We say how. This is the question. How do I make things happen? Of course, it's the wrong question to start with because you can't make metal from nothing. So the key thing here, the how, that then leads us to the final one. And the key thing here is to know that within every day that you plan, it's possible to plan your day out so that you've organized everything, so that everything happens in the right order, depending on your profile. Because I'm a dynamo profile, I know that if I want to speed up time, I will start every day with a what? I'll start creating at the beginning of the day. And that leads into the who. I will be making phone calls before lunchtime. I'll be getting into my planning in the afternoon, and I'll make sure my systems are done by the evening. And I'll organize this not just every day. I can organize that in a particular week, and it would accelerate things for me in my life. But the opposite is also true. If I've got too much going on, I can actually start the day, instead of starting from the wood, I can start it over here in the metal side, which means that I'm starting with kind of like the detailed things I need to do. It slows everything down. And then from that, I can then come to the earth, which is the when, and I can make sure my planning's in place. So I'm not really creating anything new at this point. And then from there, I then come over to the who, which is going to be about how I go about getting on the phone in the afternoon to be able to settle the things I need to settle. And then I'll do my creative side in the evening, which I'll look forward to. But absolutely, this will not be about how I move faster. It's about how I slow things down in my life and ensure that I'm able to really make sure everyone's keeping up at the same pace as me. So very powerful that you can speed up and slow down time if we're understanding this in the right way. And of course, the most important one is the final one. The final one is outside of time. It's outside of this season here, and it allows us to go into a cycle. I call it a learning cycle, which only ever lists yourself in consciousness when you get to the final question, which is the question why. This question why comes from the fifth element. The fifth element, here in China, we call it spirit. Spirit is also water energy. Water energy is not, this is spirit here, so it's something which we're all connected to. And from the spirit energy, which is as an entrepreneurial spirit, something you need to be an entrepreneur. It's more than just the mechanics of it. From this spirit energy, you'll see, as I said, water energy, spirit has a different element here. It's why, and of course that allows you to flow. All of this is about flow. It's about how do you get into flow. You can do the same thing again and again and again, and it doesn't actually mean you're getting into flow. If you actually start designing this in the right way and start every day in water, which then leads to the wood. Of course, wood needs water in order for it to grow. So this becomes the beginning and the end of every cycle. I have 8 questions that I ask at the beginning of every day, which ensure I get in flow every day. And I know that everyone out there that's really achieving great success has a ritual and a structure by which they ensure they get the best out of themselves. And in the second video, I'll be sharing with you exactly what those 8 questions are. But let me finish with this. I've just gone through the 8 different profiles. I've just gone through the fact that it is possible to double income pretty quickly using the wealth equation square, using the idea that wealth equals value times leverage. But there's another point to this as well, which is this concept of spirit, when you ask the question why. Because for a lot of us, we think we're moving really fast and we think we're actually moving up, but we're not. We actually think we're in flow because we're busy. But in a river, as well as there being a current, which if you drop a leaf in, it will go into that current without even trying. A river also has something called eddy currents. And eddy currents are kind of like those spots in the river that go round and round and round. They never really go anywhere. But the key thing about those eddy currents is you can still pretend like you're busy. So how do you know if you're in eddy current, not going anywhere, as opposed to actually being in flow? It's pretty simple. It's that every day, you keep on doing, again and again, the same thing. Even though it's not your perfect life, tomorrow you're going to wake up again and you're going to repeat it. That's an eddy current. It's only when you ask the question, why? Why am I even doing this? Why am I living the life the way I'm living it if it's not my perfect life? Only when you ask the question, why, do you ask, what do I need to change now? And that is where the spirit comes in. So what I'd like to share with you is that if you have found value in just listening through to the fact that there are ancient structures that we can use in modern times that allow us to find our flow, and it begins by getting to the core of who we are, even down to how we design our day, then I look forward to seeing you in our second video where I'll be going through exactly how you can set yourself up for success with $1 million team. I'll speak to you soon.